Chris,
You know what's going to happen if it's Joe Brady as head coach? You know what you get to do? You still get to move him, except into a bigger house on Birdsong.
Yeah, I have to go get the U-Haul and help him move his boxes into
a bigger house,
into a three-story colonial. Nothing would chat my ass more.
If that happened, we hired Joe Brady. He moves into a 3-story colonial house. His backyard is like Will Ferrell's in Eastbound and Down, when they just send people running in the backyard and he shoots them.
To another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I'm your host, Bills season ticket holder Drew Gear. That's my producer, Chris Kruger. And this is the first podcast we've recorded where we're not talking about a football game. The Bills season is officially over. But the real fun is just getting started. Like Aerosmith, the Buffalo Bills are back in the saddle again, looking for a new head coach. I went back and I looked. It was December 28th, 2016. Podcast episode number 39. Chris, what number are we on right now? Just out of curiosity.
This might be episode 831 or 832. And mind you, the first, 2 years off-season stuff was like we were doing shows every other week. It wasn't until like year 3 or 4 we were going every week.
So episode 39, almost 800 podcasts ago, we're so old that we can say, I can sit here and tell you the last time we got together to discuss a coach's firing on our podcast. December 28th. It was the week after we did our second annual Festivus episode. I believe my then wife and I had been dating now for 2 years. I think I left the Festivus episode, went to her apartment and gave her diamond earrings for Christmas. My dad was like, "Idiot, what are you doing?" I was like, "Dad, shut up. I'm in love." As I'm just bombed after a podcast. You know, all good things. You were still living in
South Buffalo.
You were still living in South Buffalo. God, life was nuts.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive. And we were sitting there talking about Rex Ryan.
We might be the only ones that, I think us and David Palermo, Numb Bills fan, we're the only ones that have gone through this before as content creators, talking about somebody getting fired.
So I went back and I listened to it, and we talked about Rex Ryan and how the writing was kind of on the wall for Rex Ryan. You know, he got cute down the stretch, was actively working away from the team's strengths because he ran out of levers to pull and thought he could trick everybody. Like, hey, they're going to be ready for the passes to Sammy Watkins, Chris. You know what I need to do? I need to throw it as far as I can downfield to literally everybody else. You know what we got to do? Running back passes. I need 50 of them. It's embarrassing, right? So you watch this happen, and then you watch Rex just unceremoniously recuse himself out of the finale at the end of the year. And I'll never forget this. Anthony Lynn taking over as head coach in the final game against the Jets. They go down there, and there's a play where the Jets kick you and me are watching the game together, and the Jets kick the ball off. And the person who Anthony Lynn assigned as kick returner for the game didn't know that that's a live ball. He treated it like a punt where he just figured, okay, well, if the other team touches it, they'll down it. So he let them pick it up in the end zone for a touchdown. You lost your mind.
It's one of the worst plays in Bills history. I can still picture Andrew Catalon on TV going, "What are the Bills doing?" It was one of the worst moments in team history.
We were making content in that cesspool of just a time to be a Bills fan. And to your point, we may be the only Bills podcast currently on air that can say we've now covered 2 Bills head coach searches. So with that, I guess we drink the longevity, right?
Yep.
Let me pop the cork on this. A little Last Shot Distillery Skinny Atlas whiskey from Jason Detro.
I've got some Eagle Rare 10 in my glass.
because you're a fancy man.
I am.
Chris, to being dumb enough to not quitting this nonsense, to being too stupid to quit. And so now, after almost a decade, the Buffalo Bills are back in the market for a head coach. And unlike the last time we went through this, the Bills aren't exactly second fiddle to a lot of other teams out there on the market looking for someone to come and lead the ship. When you think about where we are as a franchise, we've come so far from that first head coaching search. If you give it a Goog, Chris, do me a kindness and Google top NFL head coaching candidates 2017. The market wasn't overflowing with talent. It wasn't so like I remember I remember this. It was it was Anthony Lynn. But then you look, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Vance Joseph. I remember Vance Joseph being a name. And when we signed Sean McDermott, there were some people who said that we got out of all the defensive guys, we got the also ran, the ugly sister, the bridesmaid instead of the bride. And it's interesting now when you look at that list. Look at this, key candidates and hires in 2017. Doug Marrone got hired as interim head coach for the Jaguars.
No, he got hired full-time. He got the interim label ripped off.
Oh, good. So he went to the Jags.
See, I like if you look down below, there's other notable names that interviewed.
Terrell Austin. I remember when that was.
John
Filippo.
Yeah, I remember him being a hot name. Chris Richard was a hot defensive coordinator name.
Mike Smith.
Former Falcons head coach. Like
Matt Patricia. Josh McDaniels, who I think would go on after that to be a head coach of the Raiders for a hot minute.
Yeah, he was there like 2 seasons.
And it just imploded.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to look at where things have come now when you look at this list and you say to yourself, okay, who's still coaching? Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McDermott. Who else on this list of names is a head coach still?
Just McVay, Shanahan, and McDermott got fired, but Vance Joseph, I think was in Denver I think he was there for 1 season, and then they fired him. And then Anthony Lynn, he got to the Chargers and was there 2 years, and we haven't heard of him since.
It's a very different market now than it was then, but also football's, it doesn't seem like that long, 2017 to today. But think about how dramatically the game of football has changed over that time period. And so with that, you're going out into a pool of candidates and you're looking at people, and so much has changed, not just with the market, with the quality of the candidates, how you group them together, who you like, who you don't like, what you don't like about them, what you think your team needs, because your team's needs have changed, obviously. You know, we used to be the team that needed someone to come in and just literally pull us up out of the dumps. And now we need somebody to get this thing across the finish line. We're in a very different place. The market's also different, and so is the league. And the dynamics around hiring and firing have become so varied. I don't know. I feel like this isn't a conversation that you and I can just sit here and have in a vacuum together. And so I find it interesting that on an evening like this, I can bring someone in who honestly was just really giving me the business, probably ever since Monday afternoon. Someone who might know a thing or two about football. You know, they've got a little bit of acumen to them. You may or may not have heard of this person. I don't know. Mr. Greg Thompson from Cover One. Greg, why don't you just get it out of your system now? Okay. Well,
look what you have done. Behold what you have wrought.
It's my
Bathe in what you and your ilk have brought upon us.
Listen, if I was going to do it, I would have done it much worse. It would have been more like the classic 90s movie breakup where there's like a woman on a balcony throwing someone's clothes off. Like, that's how I would have done this.
Maybe Red Wedding. Like,
yeah.
Like sneaking into the suite.
I have an argument that what they did over at One Bills Drive was actually worse. It actually was worse when you look at the optics of it than me standing like over at Ralph Wilson Stadium throwing Sean McDermott's office contents out into the parking lot. Somehow what they did is more embarrassing than that.
It is, again, we'll talk a little bit about some of the different optics and things like that. It is incredibly concerning that this reaction was such a shock. They fully anticipated being celebrated for finally getting rid of the tyrant who was holding us back, and that Big Baller Bean and sunglasses memes left and right were going to be lauded and celebrated. And that, again, I think that I don't think there was any turmoil, let's say the first 4 years, because breaking the drought, then ripping down to the studs, getting the quarterback, then immediately getting back to the playoffs, then the 2020 explosion, and then still really good in 2021. So let's just, like, that first window, no one was calling for anyone's head. Like, everyone was just in the honeymoon phase. It was great.
And then and I think what happens is you then butt up against the AFC title game for the first time, and you get big boyed, and you go, oh, okay, we've got a lot of work to do. And you start seeing this thing of, okay, well, we need to make a better roster, or at least a different roster. Okay. Also, you need to do a better job in some situational things so that this doesn't happen again. And all of a sudden, this conversation starts.
Yeah. Well, then you get to that the next year, you get to 13 seconds, and you get to what is probably, I think it's reasonable to say, the peak performance moment of this team, like that run heading into that playoffs and that game against the peak of their powers Chiefs. Like, that was full peak of their powers, young Travis Kelce, still with Tyreek Hill, prime Chris Jones, like peak of their powers Kansas City Chiefs, and we were the better team. Like, we were the best team in the NFL in that moment, and no one can convince me that we would not have beaten Cincinnati and the Rams and won the Super Bowl. Like, we would have won the Super Bowl. And that started the first fissure. That started your ilk. And started, because even for the most fervent defenders, that moment opened up the window of doubt, those cracks of like, oh man, is that gonna, and you're still kind of able to convince yourself and tell yourself things. And now you got to the point where even this year, I had to go back and find it, like the moments where I turned and was ready to be done. And you want to know what they were? It was the Dolphins and the Falcons game, because I knew what it cost us, and I knew what it meant and what it was going to result in. And I even put in that message, I know I'm going to convince myself and get back on board and tell myself that it's going to be okay, and it won't. It's going to end painfully.
And those are the things where it's not unreasonable to say that a guy is gone from the organization because there was mistakes and there was problems. And at a certain point, you wonder how many more bites of the apple do you deserve as a professional in a given role. The problem is now what the Bills have done is created, for all the things that you've talked about in your podcasts that we've talked about during our live show this week, just these concepts that what you've done in the way you executed this is at a time when you need to look like the rosiest, like you need to look buttoned up. You need to look like you have your shit together as an organization. It might be the worst optics the Bills have had since Terry Pagula bought them. And I'm going back to Rex Ryan riding a tandem fucking bicycle. We look worse now. We look like a bigger clown show right now than we did that afternoon. And that's hard to reconcile when you say, hey, we're about to launch into a head coaching search.
Yeah, and I think the hard part is if it simply had have been in when we were going back and forth in our DM group and talking, like there were 4 options here. And we can debate the top 2. The top 2 being, hey, run it back one more time, hope for good health, let's try again. They're still better than the alternatives. Or, hey, if we're going to do this, clean slate, get rid of both of them, let's go find the best tandem we can. Those are easily the top 2 options. Like, it had to be one or the other. You needed that continuity. I would argue that probably a fairly distant third, but third would be, well, it's going to be easier to find a better GM than it is to find a coach. So if you're going to keep one, like, Brandon or Sean McDermott made some decent chicken salad out of the, injury rattled chicken shit that he had left on this roster this year. At least let him try to do it again. Brandon Beane, fumbled left, right, and center to put this roster together for this year and overestimated what was there. So I guess you could try that. And a distant fourth is, give a promotion and full organizational power to Brandon Beane and fire Sean McDermott. And now not only limit yourself to that organizational infrastructure, but limit yourself to the candidates who are interested in reporting directly to Brandon Beane, which I think, unfortunately for us, of course, if we open this up last year, we have Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson and all these coaches lining up to be the one who gets to coach Josh Allen. And now we have, again, we're wrong about these things all the time. Maybe one of these guys are going to be awesome and we'll celebrate that this was the turning moment in our franchise and can't believe this is what led to our Super Bowl. But it seems like a less heralded, less capable coaching class. It doesn't seem like there's a Liam Cohen or a Ben Johnson here. Maybe Clint Kubiak's that guy. We'll probably talk about that later. But the timing of it, now, even if it was then, and say that would have limited Vrabel. Maybe Vrabel wouldn't want to report to Brandon Beane, but to get to coach Josh Allen, Cohen or Ben Johnson might have been on board to do it. And now, not only that, you're going to limit yourself in a lesser class.
Oh, 100%. And so to move on from the exodus of Sean McDermott, which I know it seems tone deaf in the moment because it's been 48 hours now, 24 hours.
Not even. Probably, I don't even know if we're at 36
I don't
yet.
even know. I just know I've been getting yelled at you in my DMs for more time than I could, because you were just like, you did this. The most bad option won. And I'm just laughing, going, this is hilarious. I'm not used to seeing this, Greg, but I like it. I like this guy.
Every once in a while, you bring out the best in me.
I do. You know what? It's a gift. I really do bring out the worst in people. It really is a gift. But so given that the carousel's already been spinning for a few weeks now, does it seem tone deaf to say the Bills missed out by not getting into this head coach search earlier? I mean, I know you weren't going to fire him before the playoffs, but now you look back and go, well, damn it, if you were going to do this. Because then you hear the messaging coming out of One Bills Drive, and they go, oh, well, today Diana Rossini puts out, hey, they're getting into this thing. They're framing up their targets. They're doing all this stuff. I feel like coaches and GMs are kind of similar in the idea that you don't fire the guy you have until you have an idea of at least, hey, here's a short list of guys I think I can get. And so to hear that they're doing that work now after they've made the choice, that frightens me. Do you think that we're kind of at a disadvantage here?
So I would say, fortunately, 3 out of the 4 candidates that have been hired are guys we probably wouldn't have gone after. We weren't going to hire a Jeff Hafley, or even, I like Robert Saleh. I actually think he's going to be successful in his next role and was not set up for success in the Jets and is probably capable, especially if he hires. He went to Tennessee.
Is anyone ever set up for
for success in New York? No, correct. That's a factual statement. Jeff Hafley, whatever, maybe he's going to be a decent coach, but we weren't hiring a first-time defensive play caller, I don't think. John Harbaugh is just like, if you remove all the other information, Harbaugh, Tomlin, McDermott are the same human. Like, they're the same CEO, overall, culture builder, organizational leader guy, but that's not a improvement other than like, oh, he won a ring 18 years ago or whatever it was. So I don't think any of those were a miss. I will say I sure would have liked to have gotten an interview with Kevin Stefanski. Like, I would have liked to have had that option.
Chris was very vocal about his desire for Kevin Stefanski.
I said Kevin Stefanski should be the Bills coach for the wild card game. I said fire McDermott, because if Cleveland's going to make that kind of mistake and let Stefanski go, the only legit coach that they've ever had, he should be in Buffalo.
And you could
I'd argue you could have you could have called them up and said, hey, we both know that we're better off if we just make a trade. We will trade you, Sean McDermott, to build the organizational discipline and winning culture that you need to get back to some semblance of respectability. You guarantee him enough money to get through this Deshaun Watson chasm that you've dug, and that he's going to still be there to come out on the other side, and he will build the organizational structure that you need to do that, and Kevin Stefanski can come finish what he built here and actually have the game day chops and the play calling for sustainability for the remainder of Josh Allen's career, and both organizations would have been better for it.
It's crazy to think about it that way, and I sometimes wonder if, they'll never say it out loud, but if there's any buyer's remorse in the minds of like a Kevin Stefanski where he goes, I really wanted a job and now I kind of wish, but you can't think about things like that. You know what I mean? Like that's going to your high school reunion and you run into you see your old high school, like, I had a crush on that girl and I'm 40 pounds lighter now and I've got a good job. I think she's working at CVS. Like, maybe I could still take a stab at this. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. Like, this doesn't go anywhere positive for you. So thinking like that, moving on, Buffalo's being talked about as one of the hottest jobs locally. I hear this locally. I hear Sal Capaccio. I hear guys on the radio talking about it. It's great. It's great. But I also hear other national pundits when they're making their rankings and they're talking about this, they point to the fact that Baltimore is actually considered a more attractive position. And I think a part of that is almost a direct indictment of what the national view of our owner and our sitting GM is. When you take a look at the two franchises next to each other, they both have a former MVP quarterback. They both have playoff victories. They both have a long-standing history of success in winning football games with the rosters they currently have. It's just that Baltimore seems to get more respect for having Steve Bisciotti, which, we did a show last summer where we ranked the owners. Steve Bisciotti's widely regarded as one of the better owners in football. And then you look at the continuity between Ozzie Newsome to Eric DaCosta, and they've continued to draft well. As the years have gone by, they've put together great contending rosters year after year after year. So with that, am I right for being worried that despite having a Josh Allen, that the rest of this franchise's warts that are now kind of being laid plain for everybody with eyeballs could prevent us from obtaining maybe one of the more highly qualified individuals in this cycle?
So I think there's an important qualification there because, one, there's a difference between debatably better or as good as Baltimore and showing warts and aren't going to get a good candidate. A huge, huge gap there. So you're talking about, realistically, easily two of the five best franchises of the past decade. And that overall there is greater talent on the Baltimore roster and a greater track record of overall success in building rosters, although I would say there's a slight enough gap between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson from a perception standpoint that I think it makes it a point of preference. That I think a discerning, capable candidate, if they prefer Lamar Jackson, it is totally understandable. But I would guess that the majority prefer Josh Allen, all things equal, like, hey, I get to choose which one I coach. And then there's probably a small, Venn diagram in the middle where some of those candidates are like, well, I would prefer Josh, but that's I don't have a Kyle Hamilton. I don't have, some of the different pieces there would be enough to be a tiebreaker. So one, I think that's important to acknowledge that that's not embarrassing. That's not like some huge, black mark against Buffalo or the Bills or Josh Allen or the organization or even Terry Pegula. That's simply the reality that, we happen to open up a job at the same time as one of the other jobs that never come open. A guy had been there for 18 years and that an MVP quarterback job never comes open. And now there's two at the same time and it's a coin flip of which one's there, but they are a world away from every other job.
Yeah.
They are easily the two best jobs. And that, again, I think it's a slight preference to us, but it would be naive of us to think that we are some slam dunk better than Baltimore simply because we like Josh more than Lamar. That's a great job and something that is, significantly sought after.
Sure. And I think that some of that matters, and it's viewed differently depending on who the candidate is and where they are in their career. I think that if you're talking about let's say you're a younger person versus someone who's a little bit older, a little more tenured, someone who maybe is looking for a second or maybe even a final bite at the apple to say, hey, this might be my last chance at this. You would probably prefer to go down swinging with the Buffalo or Baltimore than anybody else. And you would wait until you know that you're kind of excluded from those roles before taking anything else too seriously. Because you'd want to know, hey, if I can get my foot in this door, this could be the thing that salvages what's left of my career. Some of the younger guys may not care as much. And at the same time, they may just be looking for the pieces and the tools. And, hey, I've got a vision. Is Buffalo, even though they have a Josh Allen, is it going to be harder for me to execute my vision in this place? You see coaches like, I think about Kellen Moore when he took that Saints job last year. And I go, God, I know that was not his first choice. But it's a job. And it's a job that there's one of 32 of and everybody wants one. So he takes that gig and it's going to go the way most Saints seasons do. And because he's in the NFC South, I guess you're going to have a puncher's chance even if you're a 500 team, but it's going to be hard for him to get there. And maybe they do at some point in his 5-year contract, but I don't know. I think about the younger crowd specifically. I've never been against the idea of them. And you could argue that some of the most successful coaches aren't long in the tooth right now. Some of the best names out there and some of the best performances we saw from teams in 2025 weren't guys with, in their 50s and 60s and guys who have decades of experience on an NFL sideline. They seem to be faring well. The problem I have, and what makes it hard for me to get there, is that NFL coaching is an industry based on who you know. It's familiarity. It's relationship building. And so guys get promoted. Guys get a head coaching job. And more often than not, they go out there and they find guys that they're comfortable with, that they know, that they go out and say, hey, can I, Robert Saleh, they're already talking about how he's going to fill the Tennessee staff with a number of people from the defensive side of the ball for San Francisco. That's how this works. And so I worry about young players. Like I think about Sean McDermott when he first took this job. He'd been around the NFL for a very long time. So it was easy for him to find guys. Like I remember Mike Waffle. Mike Waffle was one of my favorite D-line coaches in all of football. And in 2017, it was his last season he ever coached. But because he was friends of a friend of a guy who knew Mike Waffle and vouched for him, he brought Mike in to spend a year as the Bills D-line coach. And he was able to, and that's a qualified hire. He was able to get Brian Daboll, not because he'd ever worked with him anywhere before, but because he knew a guy who put him in a room and said, hey, I vouch for this guy, and I think you two might work well together. And it's because he had built those relationships that he was able to find some of the better coaches he's been able to get in his pipeline. I worry that young coaches wouldn't have access to that many relationships and that they could struggle to build those things and build what you need in terms of a full cohesive coaching staff to really take it, especially to take a team like Buffalo and capitalize now, not 3 years, 4 years from now when you've had time to grow and learn your players. You have to win now. Are you worried about that? One, and two, do organizations regularly get involved in helping coaches like that flesh out their pipeline? Like what obligation would the team have if they were to bring in a young coach to help them bridge that gap?
So I do think that it differs from coach to coach. I do think that there are gaps in readiness and how much of a plug and play staff there is. And I think a lot of that depends on first time, second time, organization, history, different pieces like that. But I also think sometimes we underestimate how networks grow and that only established former head coaches have networks. So let's use the hot name in the moment as an example. Clint Kubiak has coached for 5 different NFL teams. He's been a part of the Vikings, a part of the Broncos, a part of the Niners, a part of the Saints, a part of the Seahawks. When you think about your workplace, yes, do the longer, more established people have larger networks and more established relationships? Of course. Are there also, charismatic, good communicators at mid levels of your organization who also have made connections relatively quickly with people? And now if you think about who are the people that move up quickly in the coaching ranks and who are going to be qualified to be a head coach earlier, is probably the people that build connections and relationships faster because they're good communicators and charismatic leaders. And that's why they're being considered for these roles. So I will say, yes, of course, a younger coach has had less time to build that and less time to do that, but that's also not the same as not being ready to do those things. So with Clint Kubiak, if there are most, so just to laugh, both Rick Dennison and Leslie Frazier are on the Seahawks staff right now, just to brace yourself accordingly. But there are multiple people in different spots. Aiden Durde is a really well-respected up-and-coming defensive coordinator, but Mike McDonald calls the plays on game day. So if there's a chance for him to come over and be the play caller, is that really a lateral position? Would the Seahawks stop him from having the chance to go become the play caller and come with Clint Kubiak? Or would it be Brandon Beane saying, if you're not sure, if you don't already have someone lined up, we'd love to reach out to an established former head coach like a Jim Schwartz or a Brian Flores who can come in and kind of, run that side of the ball and be able to bring with some of their staff to be able to do that and take that off of your plate, because you're going to be a first-time head coach and a play caller. And some coaches might be interested in doing that. I know they did that with Mike McDaniel when he first started in Miami. They did that famously with Sean McVay and Wade Phillips, where they literally called Wade Phillips the head coach of the defense in that first part of it. And it was like two teams being run during that time, but McVay was the head coach. So that there are precedents of that working really well, even when it was an arranged marriage, even when it wasn't a set up thing. Or the alternative, I've heard some things that Jesse Minter put out feelers to Cliff Kingsbury and Mike McDaniel to say hey, if I end up getting a spot here, would you guys be interested? Because most of his network is on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that's the biggest area that comes in is I trust Clint Kubiak to have a fleshed out offensive staff ready to go, because he's been an offensive coach everywhere he's gone. So of course his relationships and time on task in the buildings is real, but it's almost all on the offensive side of the ball. Or if you brought in a Jesse Minter or a Chris Shula, I would expect it to go the opposite direction. I know some people want to pair guys that they're with to do that. But, it depends on the scenario. Is that Nate Shieldhouse, that guy that comes with Shula and does that as a combo, some of those kind of things. I think that's rumored as Pittsburgh's target right now. So some of those scenarios, obviously, I feel very strongly there. I think, sadly, like anything else with our bad timing, I think there are better defensive coaches available right now than offensive coaches in this hiring cycle. We don't want a defensive coach. This is finally our time to reset the clock and get someone sustainable for this final 5 to 8 year run of Josh Allen's career and what we have left of his prime, to have sustainability in the play calling. So we're forced to pick an offensive coach, and I just hope we pick the best one.
We were talking at the top of the show about how it was 2.5 years ago. I called WGR at approximately 12:30 at night because our friend Nate Geary, was just in the trenches taking grenades after the Bills dropped that Sunday Night Football game in Cincinnati, where they were just flat, never in the game, never really threatening to win the game. And I think it was 24-18 when you go back and look at the box score, but Cincinnati was never concerned. And afterwards, my friend was like, nope, that's not how this night ends. We can't do that because we just drank a bunch of beers and my night isn't going to end on a down note. So we watched a Netflix comedy special. And then as I'm driving home, I was like, I'll just turn on the radio and see how it's going. And Nate's just getting kicked in the teeth. And so I lobbed him the John Fox. Just, hey, man, John Fox 2.0. What do you think of that? Chew on this for 20 minutes and don't pick up the phone. And I punched out. And after that, you start thinking about the similarities of the situations and going, man, there was a window, it was closing. The Broncos did what they had to do. They pivoted to offense, even though you could blame the defense being like, oh, the defense was bad and that's why they got blown out in the Super Bowl. Maybe, but at the same time, the following year they win a Super Bowl, and then, mind you, everyone got fired 2 years later. The whole thing.
And not a highly lauded coach. No. Like, that was not a celebrated hire. That was actually considered a, like a...
See, I'm happy you remember this, because it was not
like John Elway's buddy, like, oh my God, they just like gifted the head coaching job of Peyton Manning and this championship caliber team to John Elway's, like,
well, because of the way
backup quarterback lackey.
And so that's where sometimes you do have to take that with a grain of salt. I know some of the candidates, we're going to talk about it tonight after we let you go. We all feel a certain kind of way about them, and some of it is it's historical, right? But that doesn't mean that
just as a reminder, I just saw the two quarterback coaching classes around that window. Anthony Lynn was ranked above Sean McVay the previous year, and the next year Kyle Shanahan was 5th and Sean McDermott was 13th out of 13, and they're easily the top two of that class. I think there's only one other that still has a job out of that class, but there were 12 other coaches ranked above McDermott that he was light years more successful than, and even Kyle Shanahan, who was, middling success but has been to Super Bowls, was ranked 5th.
We still have the audio of the now fired Jerry Sullivan trashing the Sean McDermott hire the day it was announced. And that audio is evergreen. It's fantastic because it just underscores that, you don't know. And if you lean too hard into the shtick of, well, no one's ever going to be good enough, then guess what? I bet you when Bill Belichick got brought into the Patriots and they go, wait a minute, is this the guy who completely blew it with the Browns and just belly flopped with what are we talking about? Why are you bringing this guy in here? You can't.
So if you're going to compare that Kubiak hire, in that moment of like, hey, they finally got rid of the guy and then it worked the next year, but it was this weird, like, familial, handshake deal, that'd be like a Dable or a Brady, which I don't think would be celebrated. I think that I would have significant questions if they look at this as like, oh, we're going to keep everything else the same. The only problem was you, Sean. Everything else was great. And they just, let's say it's bump Brady up and bring Dable in as OC, or bump Brady up and bring Davis Webb in as OC, or bring Dable in and bring Davis Webb in as OC. Some combination of like, hey, we're going to make Josh happy and we're just going to keep everything rocking the same. That would be the closest to that scenario in Denver. And we would get laughed at the same way Denver did of doing that with Gary Kubiak. And our only prayer would be like, maybe it'll work for us too.
We would become the meme from what is it?
Arrested Development. Yeah, but does it ever work for them? No, but they somehow convince themselves that it could possibly work, but it might just work for us.
I can't wait to see how this whole thing unravels, and it's sad that I have to frame it like that because it's what it feels like.
I want to end on this because I got a question for Greg Thompson. Don't worry, it's about football. Look at this man right here. True or false? This man does not deserve the amenities offered in this room.
It is pretty delightful. I will say that the background, the setup, the studio, what you guys have built is incredible. And when like a real podcast gets to use it, it's going to be awesome. Like, it is going to be so cool.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you guys set this up for whoever's really going to like run with it and thrive is it's amazing. Like, this is really, really cool. I'm excited to see that.
It's great because people still show up to our live shows, Greg, and comment down below. Whoever our guest is that night, we have people who come in and go, I don't know what's happening right now, but this show is beneath them. And I just...
No, I appreciate it, guy. This is awesome.
And the funniest part is they don't know that
your setup's ridiculous.
That just tickles like the warm, like the blackest parts of my heart when I see that. I'm like, I upset you so much that you had to type something out. You got so mad at me you had to hit the keyboard. That's awesome. That means I made you feel something. You know that feeling. I do it to everybody.
Yeah. No, and honestly, like, it's, I had reached that point earlier this year, and I knew I was past the point. And, I obviously Cover One, I think, is accused regularly of being an apologist, specifically for McDermott and for the team. And all of us had reached that point of like, all right, if they got to move on, they got to move on. Like, I'm not going to celebrate it. I think he's a good man. I'm not going to cheer because a good man lost his job. But I get it. Like, we reached that point. This needed to happen. I just am flabbergasted at the way they had it. And it is pure, whatever you want to call it, wish casting, copium, whatever the kids are calling it now. Like, I'm purely clinging to my homerism of like, oh, I hope we get it right. But I have a lot of not great feelings.
Greg Thompson, Cover One, leader of their podcast network with Aaron Quinn, Cover One Buffalo, at Greg Thompson on Twitter. And
see, what's funny is you say that, and Eric Turner's going to come in here and just put you in a full Nelson. It'll be the funniest thing I've ever seen.
I mean, I'll let Eric put me in a full Nelson next time we do one of those summer Cover One meetups. We haven't done those in a few years, but according to Greg, I'm going to have to start looking for a new host because he doesn't. You should not, like, I swear to God. Like,
what you need is a leading man. You need a handsome, someone who dresses well. You need a handsome, dapper gentleman to come in here, sit down in this chair, and spin yarns that people want to sit in front of for hours.
I mean, but
that ain't me, baby. That's not what we're doing here.
I mean, what we have in this room, it's like a starter speakeasy room, just based on what we're seeing on camera right now.
You're such a dork for saying that out loud. A starter speakeasy.
Hey, we could go to a real speakeasy with Emmanuel Acho and LaShawn McCoy.
So as we move on with the conversation here, it's really good to pick Greg's brain and kind of frame this because there are names and we have feelings about those names. And I want to get them out while I still can before anything bad happens. And I just want to talk about it a little bit in a place where I can say, look, I got this off my chest before anybody else came in and pissed in my cornflakes about it. And so I guess if I'm going to launch into this, we were just sitting here having a conversation about youth and the young guys and everything else. I know for a fact, that's kind of where I want to start this conversation. I know for a fact that Greg Thompson has said both publicly and on his podcast that Clint Kubiak is, out of the names available, his hire of choice. He likes the idea of a coach who comes in and like has this acumen of everything I've touched in an offensive perspective, everywhere I've gone has worked. And it's gone well. Whether it's in the collegiate ranks, whether it's college, whether it's in the pros here with the Saints and with the Seahawks, he's doing a hell of a job. And so with that, it's hard to say that you wouldn't want a guy like that in your organization, even if you are scared of his youth. Is that fair, Chris?
Yeah, that's fine.
Like to say, hey, he is young, but also the guy just touches. It's almost like the thing I think about Curt Cignetti. Curt Cignetti in Indiana just won probably one of the most fun national title games I've watched in a while.
Total side, did you hear about Cignetti talk about drinking beer?
No.
He said, I don't drink beer for like the name on the bottle. If I'm going to get a beer, I'll look at the alcohol content and then decide if I want it. Turns out he's a double IPA guy.
Cignetti gets down. That's why he's always grumpy. He's like me. I'm the best version of myself when you get me to drink number 2. I bet you Cignetti's a great time if you get 2 of those like 7.5%ers in him. So when you think about the guys, right? When you think about the Clint Kubiaks, he was the Kansas wide receiver coach, and then he goes on to be the passing game coordinator for multiple teams, Minnesota, San Francisco. Then he's the offensive coordinator for the Vikings under O'Connell. Does well. The Broncos, the Saints, the Seahawks. The guy touches things, they go well. Clint Kubiak makes a lot of sense if that's the way you want to go, especially hearing Greg talk about, hey, he's got an upshot to building his own staff. Jesse Minter, a guy who, hey, I'm already putting out feelers and I'm comfortable reaching out to names, guys with tenure to say, hey, can you come help me? I think that's going to be the difference. right? Like, I think that's going to be the difference in what can propel these guys to success and not. You know, the Chris Shula, the Jesse Minter, and the Clint Kubiaks. Let's take those three guys and call them the young guys. And you say, okay, who can you get to come with you? That's half the puzzle. But the other side is also, I guess I hesitate because the inexperience they would have and what they would have to bring to the table in the first 1 to 2 years of their tenure here in Buffalo when it comes to in-game situational football, not just as a coordinator, but as a head coach, and playoff experience. I think that's important. Now, anybody who wants to argue with me about that can take a look at Liam Cohen. Liam Cohen's team, you know, I heard the trope all week. Oh, the better team lost. Oh, the better team didn't win this game. Well, those people can go to hell. But also, if Liam Cohen decides to just take the points, don't get cute. Don't go for it on fourth down. Don't go for a dagger early in a football game. Points in the postseason weigh more than points in the regular season. Even though it sounds stupid, that's the reality. Tenured coaches know, hey, I'm going to take every single point the other team is willing to give me. Don't get greedy because it will come back to haunt you later in football games. And sure enough, Liam Cohen costs himself and his team, and they end up losing by how many points, Chris? 4?
3?
3? 4?
3? It doesn't matter. You still lost.
Doesn't matter. But I think a more tenured coach, seasoned with more experience, would know that. And maybe they don't make the mistakes that Liam Cohen did. And maybe the Bills never make it to the divisional round to lose the way that they did. Even the hot name that got hired last year, Ben Johnson, he had a team that needed a miracle touchdown drive to force overtime and then still stalled out on offense against the Rams defense led by Chris Shula, another young talent in the NFL. I don't dislike any of the young guys. Kubiak seems like he would be, in theory, exactly what the doctor ordered for the Buffalo Bills. But I don't know. I feel like you would not only need a guy. You don't just need a coordinator on the other side of the ball or experienced coaches. You also need guys with playoff experience who can get in your ear and help you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, Mike, think about it. It's not impossible. Mike Tomlin won his first Super Bowl at the age of 36. But he inherited Bill Cowher's powerhouse team and roster and a franchise quarterback. And that Super Bowl win came in one of the craziest firefights of a Super Bowl I've ever seen. You go back and watch that Steelers-Cardinals Super Bowl, it might be the most exciting. Like, we've seen some good Super Bowls. That was probably the most exciting. Just crazy swings and lead changes late. Casey Hampton returning a 90-something yard fumble recovery as a defensive tackle. Or was it James Harrison?
James Harrison, and it was an interception.
What? Because I remember Casey
100 yards.
Oh, Casey Hampton blocked for him because I remember Casey Hampton being shaped like a bowling ball, literally like a bowling ball. He was like 300 and something pounds, and he needed oxygen just because he was trying to block. And then there's a pass to Larry Fitzgerald in the fourth quarter where he just splits the safeties and he's gone, and all of a sudden the Cardinals have the lead again. The Steelers put on this drive to go score, long drive, and it's 2 plays, and all of a sudden Arizona's winning, and you go, oh shit, are they going to pull this off? Great Super Bowl. He was 36. McVay also won a Super Bowl at the age of 36. So it can be done, but that Rams team burned every single scrap of draft capital it owned, swung for the fences in free agency, and had a stacked roster at every single meaningful position. It had Matt Stafford at quarterback. It had OBJ at wide receiver. It had Von Miller and Aaron Donald on the defensive line. They were gross.
Yeah, and then what they do, they tore it down.
Leonard Floyd.
They tore it down, and they've been in the dumps for years, just like Brandon Beans told us.
Right? Like these kids out here playing fantasy football, and all of a sudden they're playing in the champion. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's just hilarious to think about, like, everything. McVay also had NFL veteran Raheem Morris as his defensive coordinator. Shane Waldron, Zach Taylor, and Kevin O'Connell all on offense with him, who all went on to be head coaches in their own right. So that staff had star power on the field and on the sidelines, and it still came down to a final drive in the Super Bowl, and they almost didn't win. It's hard to win a Super Bowl in the NFL. I think it's harder when you're young and underexperienced. And for that reason alone, I pause and I hesitate when it comes to the young crowd.
See, my problem is whatever tiers that you have set up here, it's going to be a hard sell for me, and I think a lot of the fan base for a defensive guy.
Sure.
It's like if Dave Gear came to you and was like, "Hey, I think you should have a relationship with your real dad," and you're just like, "Well, this is a hard sell."
What,
Dude,
why
sell it to me.
How is this going to work? And he goes, "Well,
yeah.
You already had something that was better. You were already raised by a better human being and a better person. Now here's like a watered down, crappier version of that thing that you should also just kind of, but don't worry. It'll go, what, better? No. It'll get, now there's a 0% chance.
Yeah, just if Jesse Minter, Anthony Weaver, or Raheem Morris, any defensive head coach, it's a hard sell for me.
Well, then you're really going to hate who I lead off the old guys with.
Got to go offense.
Chris, here we go. The old guys. Oh, boy, buckle up. How about Brian Flores for you?
No.
Brian Flores, to me, is interesting, if only because you're talking about a guy who's been the architect of some of the league's more impressive defenses, and you're a team that, Chris, what's the thing that always fails you when it matters? It's not your offense. Your offense goes into the playoffs and loses games that they score 24, 27, and 30 points in. That's not the reason that you haven't gone to a Super Bowl yet. So there's something to be said for the idea that, guess what I need? I don't need to score 50 points. That's not the answer. The answer is I need somebody to come in and coach the defense so that when Josh Allen goes to the bench with 2.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and a 4-point lead, it stays that way. That's it. That it stays that way. And Brian Flores has been very impressive as a defensive coordinator over the last few years. And I think it's noteworthy that while Kevin O'Connell got a ton of praise when he had the last couple of years that he's had over there in Minnesota, everything went to shit the second he injected a rookie quarterback, like a memeably bad rookie quarterback, into the mix.
Yeah, McCarthy was terrible.
And yet they won games, not even with McCarthy, but with something called Max Brosmer, because the defense showed up. The defense scored points. The defense held the other team. I need that in my life. I would argue that something like that should be something that Bills fans want, especially because he did it without traditional star power. Like, yeah, they went out and got Jared Allen, who's like 34 years old on the defensive line. And they've got, what's the guy from, Hightower, what's that, Police Academy?
Sure.
No, I think from the Steelers. But it's the idea that this guy had some aged interior linemen and underrated DBs and went out there and put on a show as a defensive coordinator.
He just strikes me as I'd have to talk to Alf about him, but Brian Flores just strikes me as like a culture guy. Change the culture.
Well, I don't know that he can change it. Here's the problem. That's going to be the question, because the personality issues and the culture issues that he developed in Miami is exactly what tanked his career. So before you could even think about hiring a guy like that, you'd have to sit down and go like, look, we just had one head coach who allegedly behind the scenes, McDermott's cheese grater of a personality, it was a walk in the park compared to what Brian Flores was bringing to the table. And he actively tried to undermine a quarterback he didn't like. Nobody is going to sign up for that unless they know that he's grown up a little bit and that he's changed, that he's not on his bullshit anymore. Another guy who kind of fits this same mold for different, like on the other side of the ball, is Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll's name was always going to come up in this. It started during the season. People were like, oh, fire Joe Brady and bring in Brian Daboll for the playoffs. A part of me thinks it has more to do with the warm and fuzzy that everybody has from Josh Allen's memories of yesteryear when we had Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley just running around in people's secondaries. And I think it has more to do with that than what Daboll could reasonably come back here and do now with this crop of players and this franchise moving forward. With that said, if he came back here and won a Super Bowl, it would not only be poetic for the city of Buffalo, but also I would buy all of his beers at the Queen of Heaven Carnival forever.
I was going to say that Queen of Heaven Carnival would be lit.
Oh my God!
Yeah, there would be a station for the Super Bowl trophy. Like, come get your picture with the trophy and Brian Dable.
Dable,
and he's just there pounding beers, just taking pictures.
Not even just pounding beers. He'd be smoking 36-inch Cuban cigars. Like, so big they have to be like flown in. What I think is weird about Dable, he's too experienced now as a coordinator to really go back to that role. Because if you want to say, hey, you know who's a good idea as a coordinator? Brian Dable. And you go, well, wait a minute, how many bites at the apple did he have with it? And how many times did it go well? Oh, not many at all. Although he did get Brady Quinn twice in his career, and that's not really fair. How do you have Brady Quinn get fired from a job where you do poorly with Brady Quinn? You get a job somewhere else, and then all of a sudden they get Brady Quinn and make him the starting quarterback. You're like, what the hell? What's happening here? Why'd you do this to me?
I think I don't even know if he's in your list, but I'd heard that Mike McDaniel had said, I'd rather take a prominent offensive coordinator job over like getting hired by Arizona or Cleveland.
Yep.
Or some job where I don't think I'm going to last more than 3 seasons.
And that's probably a lesson he learned from the mess he walked into in Miami, where he was like, well, I can salvage somebody else's poor draft choices and I can fix he showed up saying, hey, Tua, I'm going to fix you. That's not how this works, man. That's not what NFL head coaching is. That's what a coordinator does. That's not what a head coach does. And I want to know about Dable's history in New York. If we were going to hire him as our head coach, do you know that just in 2025, he lost 4 games, 4 of them, with a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter? I want to know why. Why do Dable's teams wilt when things really get tough? Think back to that Denver game, multi-score lead in the fourth quarter. It's bad. And then you look at his demeanor and he's yelling on the sidelines. He's throwing tablets. He's storming into the injury tent to find out what's going on with Jackson Dart. I would have to know that his emotional maturity was on point, and I'd want to know why your teams can't close before I could trust a hire like Brian Dable.
Look up there. I got the Giants defensive staff.
What do we got here?
Have you heard of any of those people for head coaching or, DC jobs?
So maybe that's part of the conversation. When you bring him in for an interview and you say, hey, Brian, why don't you stop by for an interview? I need to know what you're thinking. I need to know where your head's at. I need to know what you want to do from a defensive perspective. If you need our help, maybe the franchise can help you get a guy. But I think it's tough. And I don't know what his relationship is like. Well, what is his reputation like in terms of how you go out and attract that type of talent? I don't know. I just think that Brian Flores and Brian Dable are both flawed. They're the best of the older crowd, but they're flawed. And I don't love it. And then you have the group that I've simply labeled, I'll kill you. And this is easy, Chris. This is easy. Anthony Weaver. The hell has Anthony Weaver done in the NFL that makes you think that's a good idea? A defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver has done all of what? Let's see here. He was the Miami Dolphins.
He was with us in 13.
Awesome. So he was here. He bounced around as a line coach. He was so he's only been a defensive coordinator once with the Miami Dolphins the last 2 years. And
Houston 2020, he had 2 roles.
Yeah, and do you think it's gone well for any of those teams? I don't think so. I don't want to hear any more about Anthony Weaver. Joe Brady. Let's talk about Joseph Brady. First of all, he'd have to lose the flat brim caps. Those would not be acceptable as Bills head coach. Also, I don't know why you would steer into something that hasn't worked to this point. The entire world screams about screen passes in inopportune moments. You're going to give that guy the reins? You're going to let him drive the car? I don't understand all the things that everybody hates about what our offense turned into. You're going to give this guy head coaching things. Then what actually changed? Chris,
you know what's going to happen if it's Joe Brady as head coach? You know what you get to do? You still get to move him, except into a bigger house on Birdsong.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I have to go get the U-Haul and help him move his boxes into like
into a bigger house,
into a 3-story like a 3-story colonial.
Yeah.
God, nothing would chat my ass more.
I bet you Joe, if that happened, we hired Joe Brady, he moves into a 3-story colonial house. His backyard is like Will Ferrell's in Eastbound and Down. When they just send people running in the backyard and he shoots them.
I think he would I think he would still keep an apartment in North Tonawanda.
Yeah.
Just so he could hit the Capootie's ladies.
Yeah,
night.
you don't want to pay those Uber prices from Tonawanda to Orchard Park.
He's just I think it would be a giant mistake. I think that Joe Brady, maybe some people think he's a qualified football mind. I think you've seen 2 years of what Josh Allen can be with him at the helm.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
What are we doing?
What are we doing? Houston game. What are we doing?
And that's the guy that you want to turn this over to. Not a chance. How about Mike McCarthy? Somebody brought Mike McCarthy up. Besides having no neck, I got a whole bunch of other problems with Mike McCarthy. He looks like Grimace. I hate the idea of this guy. No, look, think about it. He's known for having Aaron Rodgers, and they go, well, he's an offensive mind, and he's done this, and he's done that. Cool. He had the head coaching job in Green Bay for 12 years and won one single Super Bowl. Isn't that kind of what Sean McDermott just got fired for? Like, hey, you hung around for way too long and didn't have enough success. And yet now you're going to talk about a guy like Mike McCarthy? Ew. Gross. Also, there was a ton of his time in Green Bay where he was 11-5, 10-6. All these seasons that we complained about how Sean McDermott missed the 1 seed over and over and over again. Well, guess what? Mike McCarthy just kept giving up home field advantage in the playoffs and eventually would see them bounced on the road. 6 times, Chris, they had to go on the road and lost in the playoffs. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
I'm drawing a lot of parallels here. Also, he then went to Dallas and did one of the funniest things of all time. Imagine going like 1 and 2 in the playoffs.
He went 1-3 in the playoffs with Dallas.
12-5, 12-5, 12-5 from 2021 to 2023, back to back to back 12-5 seasons. And you hosted a wild card round and you lost in 2 of them. Can you imagine what would happen if Mike McCarthy came in here, coached the Bills to winning the East? We win the East. We wrestle it back from the Patriots. They have a down year. We come back. We get it. And then the Jaguars roll in here and just blast us. Just make us look foolish. And then think back to that 49ers loss. They lost to the 49ers because Dak Prescott, this offensive head coach, his quarterback had no idea what to do. Flummoxed. He forgot to clock the football. Then he tried to rush a play, but it was too late. They didn't get the snap off in time. And he tried to clock it for a game-tying field goal, and they were way too far away, but also ran out of clock. It's the dumbest sequence you'll ever see. That's a Mike McCarthy team. At least we know the Bills have never done that. I argue it could get a lot worse, right? It could get a lot worse if you hire the wrong aged guy. And then for everybody out there who's talking about Mike Tomlin, I'll put you in the trunk of a car and roll it into Lake Erie. One of the things I hate about Mike Tomlin teams, you notice the eventual fade where they just like get cold down the stretch. They start the season hot. They'll take a lead. Lamar Jackson gets hurt. Joe Burrow gets hurt. All of a sudden he's running away. And then they inevitably get blown out in a playoff loss. I think up until this year was the first time that the Steelers had, what was the stat? They were losing at some point of every single wild card loss by at least 21 points. Coming into this season for like 5 straight years, 5 or 6 years. And it's very funny because you know how he gets there? He makes his players hit during practice all season long. He has that old school iron sharpens iron mentality. And then guess what happens? All of your old veteran players that your team seems to thrive on are worn down and gassed out by the end of the year. Also, I hate the way he handled his roster. think about this. Here's a hilarious set of circumstances that underscores why Mike Tomlin should never coach in the NFL again. George Pickens was a wide receiver on Mike Tomlin's team. Mike Tomlin couldn't control George Pickens. George Pickens was rowdy. He didn't listen. He was threatened to be benched. I think he was benched for parts of games, but he was talented. He was just inconsistent. And instead of working with the kid and finding out a way to make it work, they divorced, and he shipped him out to Dallas for what, like a third-round pick? Because I think I remember being angry that the Bills didn't trade a third-round pick for George Pickens. You split from a player who was young, who was cost-effective for the season, and then went on to be one of the league's leading wide receivers, like across the entire NFL. He was one of the most effective wide receivers.
Pickens and a 27 6th to Dallas for a 26 third and 27 fifth.
Okay. So the ones in the back end are kind of shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. But either way, you trade him away and say he's just not a player I can work with. We don't see a future for him here. Then you go out and trade for and pay a name wide receiver in DK Metcalf, who regresses from all of his previous seasons. And then you spend the trade deadline working the phones because you're like, well, I need more wide receiver talent. You had it. You had the wide receiver talent in your back pocket. You just couldn't figure out how to get a young kid who didn't want to adopt your yes, sir, no, sir, iron sharpens iron mentality, and you couldn't work with him, and so you alienated him. And now he's going to go out there and get paid a boatload of money in free agency. Is that what we need here, Chris? Rigidity and an inability to work with young, maybe problematic talent and get the best out of them?
No.
Absolutely not. So I don't see that attitude maximizing what few assets the Bills are going to be able to cobble together to augment the offense this offseason to make a Super Bowl run. Like, I don't see that attitude, not even just from Mike Tomlin, but for any of these guys. Any of these names we're talking about, I think more than anything, it's going to come down to attitude. Can you work with these guys? Can you find a way to make Keon Coleman useful? That's what it's going to take. I don't care who it is. Can you find a way to get more out of Dalton Kincaid? Oh, we got to baby him because of his injuries. Fuck his injuries. Get him out there. Does he want to get paid or no? Then go earn it. Don't just sit around here playing 26% of my snaps. What? You're on the bread. John Feeney used to call that being on the bread line. You're getting paid an awful lot of money to stand around and loaf. Yes. I need a coach who can come in and break us of this, just all of these things. And whoever can navigate that, God bless him. I'm fascinated to see which tier of player, or coach, which tier of advisor, and where they end up with all this. It's going to be fascinating how this coaching search shakes out, whether the Bills can get their guy. You know, maybe you'll find out, well, they had a guy, but they didn't really get their guy, but we're going to call him our guy. You know how that happens, Chris.
Yes.
When the coaching carousel's running and you're like, shit, we liked a guy and he didn't like us. Damn. So now whoever we do pick, he's our guy, though. We were like when the Jets brought in Adam Gase. And they were like, no, don't worry. We totally vetted him. Everything's cool. He starts doing cocaine eyes at the during his initial press conference. I just hope that this goes well. We can't have a Gase thing or else everyone's getting fired. This whole thing's going to end up in the dumpster, and we're going to be back with Todd, the 1997, 1998, like Todd Collins era of Bills football. And I don't want to think about that. I'd prefer to think about what happens if and when they identify at least a decent coach out of this, whose talents can augment the football team and at least maintain this trajectory we've been on, where we just need a few bounces to go our way. Time will tell. I'm sure we're going to get an answer quickly because, Chris, we're running out of time. It's already time to start your offseason planning. You have to know, what does this coach want? What does he need? I would say the Bills should probably have already interviewed and narrowed down their head coach within, the next 2 weeks?
Yes.
So by the time we get together to podcast again, it's entirely possible they already have their next head coach.
Yep. And just for context, it is Tuesday night, 7:16 in the evening. News has come down that Pagula and Brandon Beane will meet with the media tomorrow, Wednesday, at 10 a.m. I'm sure we'll maybe touch a smidge on that in the live show. If you're watching this, go back to our YouTube page, click on that live tab, and watch the live show.
Christ alive, guys. We're back here. We're back in this place after a decade of podcasting. Let's hope they nail this one, because I don't think I have another decade of this in me, Chris. This has been a lot of fun, but for tonight, we got to get out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. A big thank you to Greg Thompson. This has been your Rockpile Report.